Howdy folks, thanks for stopping in at Big Mook's Forge. In today's Mordheim video, I'm going to talk about Overwatch Stance and how to set up an Overwatch chain.
Big Mook's Forge.
Alright, so Overwatch Stance is an offensive stance that any character with a ranged weapon in his hands can assume, providing that his weapon is loaded and he has the required offense points. When your character assumes Overwatch Stance, he'll get a free shot at the first enemy that moves or enters his field of view within his weapon's range. Now at face value, this is great, right? You get to punch holes in the bad guy before he even engages any of your characters in combat. Now, the immediately apparent use for Overwatch is to soften up the bad guys before they get to grips with your units. Now, what if I told you there's another use for Overwatch that'll radically change your view of ranged combatants? Now, in order to explain this adequately, I'd first need to break down the mechanics of Overwatch. So let's pick it up from where you selected Overwatch Stance from the ability wheel. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that your character's turn is over, no matter how many offense or strategy points you've got left. Now, as with any of the stances, make sure you're done moving before you select the stance. From here, your character is going to be on autopilot until his turn in the initiative order comes back around. If no enemy units move into your field of fire before your next turn, your turn starts as usual. Should an enemy unit trigger an Overwatch attack, their character is stopped right where he stands and your attack is resolved. Now, hit or miss, the enemy resumes his turn with two exceptions. If you score a critical hit and he then fails his stun resistance roll, the character will become stunned and his turn will end. Or, if your shot depletes the last of his health, he'll of course be taken out of action right then and there. If the enemy unit is not dead or stunned, he'll be able to carry on with his turn. And from there, if he chooses to continue moving, he does so as if he triggered a trap or looted an environmental spawn, meaning that all of his previous movement markers are forfeited and he'll not be able to backtrack from that point. Should he move far enough from the center of his movement range that a new marker is placed, it's going to cost him another strategy point. If he is on his last strategy point, he remains right where he was when he triggered the Overwatch shot. If you set several units in Overwatch with overlapping fields of fire, you've created an Overwatch chain. And what happens when the enemy unit moves into the area is the first unit whose field of fire he enters makes his ranged attack and it is immediately resolved. If the enemy unit continues to move and enters the next unit's field of fire, that attack is then resolved. If he continues moving and triggers yet a third Overwatch, that attack is then resolved. So on and so forth. With each Overwatch shot, the enemy unit has to spend another strategy point to continue moving, even if it's just to seek cover. Now, a lot of times, the loss of several strategy points is enough to leave an enemy unit well short of his destination. Now, should he make it to your front lines, he's likely to be wounded and very low on strategy points. In the case of an enemy henchman, he probably won't even be able to assume a defensive stance of any sort. In the case of an enemy hero, he'll likely be unable to use certain special abilities or advanced defensive stances. Your melee troops should be able to make short work of him. Should your Overwatch shots halt the enemy, you could spend the next turn shooting at him with your ranged units, and then charge in with your melee troops to finish him off, or you can fall back and set it up all over again. And just remember to reload your weapon if your unit has fired any shots. There's also the possibility that you could halt him in a narrow passage or an opening and leave the rear elements of the enemy's forces blocked off and unable to add their weight to the fight. Skills like Numbing Poison, Warp Poison, and Entrenched will enhance your ranged attacker's ability to wreck your opponent's plans. Now, setting up an Overwatch chain is pretty easy if you remember a few things. First, spread your shooters out enough that the enemy unit has to move far enough from the center of his movement range that he has to spend a strategy point. In a PvP match, you'll need to make an effort to disguise your plan. A savvy player will likely notice 3 archers standing in a line and will make an effort to mitigate the effects of your Overwatch chain. You may also need to bait your trap. Now, while an AI unit may have no qualms about rushing straight through your Overwatch chain in an attempt to attack the very archers that are about to punch holes in his hide, a player may need a reason to risk the possibility that you've set a trap. Something like a squishy mage or a weirdstone cluster or even your warband leader would make for a very juicy temptation. Now, I've been able to set up successful Overwatch chains with every warband except for the Sisters. And in case you're not familiar with the Sisters of Sigmar, they don't have access to ranged weapons other than magic. With a bit of practice and familiarity with your unit's equipment, you'll soon be spotting opportunities to set up Overwatch chains and using them to great effect. Now, I appreciate you taking the time to watch my video, especially if you made it this far. If you found this video entertaining or helpful, well, leave me a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this one, mash that subscribe button. That's all I've got for you folks today. I'll see y'all on the mean streets of Mordheim.
You follow, Luke.